So the first thing on the news this morning when I woke up was our government, the British government, are concerned that young people aren't working. So many of them are idle and they don't know what they're up to. Well, you know, they're probably doing something. They probably are doing something. The government just doesn't know it. There are lots of things you can do nowadays online that the government doesn't need to know about. So, you know, I mean, I think that's maybe not as true as the statistics might show. So these are people who are not young people, I think under, I don't know, 20 or 25 or something. No, I think probably under 20. They're talking about quite a young group of people in this country, UK, who are not working and are not, I don't think they're claiming benefits either. And they're not in education, or they might be claiming benefits, but they're not in education and they're not working. So the government is kind of, well, what are they doing? And they're in their wisdom today, they've sort of questioned why there are no Saturday jobs anymore. Now, the last time I had a proper job was my Saturday job. So my Saturday jobs, I had two, were, really, really important to me so I could get money for cigarettes and alcohol. And my first job was when I was 14, and I worked in a shop. I loved working there. And I was just thinking how lovely it would be today if older people had Saturday jobs. I'm thinking about, you know, the loneliness and the solitude and the lack of community and those sort of things that so many old people are through no fault of their own, subjected to day in, day out. You know, what if your wife or your husband has died? Your family is the other side of the country or the other side of the world even, or perhaps they've disowned you. I mean, that an incredible amount of elderly people have been disowned for whatever reason. Who gives a flying F what happened? You know, get over themselves, go and see their bloody parents, you know. What those people are going through day in, day out, that solitude must be just absolutely horrible, really, really horrible and cruel. And it's one of the worst cruelties that we can push onto people, you know, that they are completely ostracised just because they're old and just because they're not at work or they're not usable anymore. I mean, that's what it is, isn't it? This government, knows that young people are fit and healthy and they're not going to be taking time off work. Because I'll tell you what, if I had a full-time job, I'd be off work every 3 days. I'd have a migraine, or I'd have arthritis, or, you know, my IBS would flare up, or something else would flare up. So it makes sense, really, in terms of a workforce and employing a functioning workforce, that you would look to the young, not to the old. But remember, these governments are just looking for pawns in a consumerist capitalist society. I mean, they don't really care about you and what you can offer the world. Or if you're a young person, you know, they don't care what trajectory you're on emotionally, what's happened to you, and because they're really growing up in a horrible world, aren't they? I mean, I'm so glad that I had my children in the 80s and not now, because I just think this world to grow up in must be awful, absolutely awful. Look, it's bad enough for the elderly, but for young people to have been conditioned on the internet, I just think it's so intellectually it's a crime, emotionally it's a crime, for the good of the planet it's a crime. You know, you were just producing a generation of weirdos, frankly. But that's for another discussion. So getting back to this idea where the elderly have a Saturday job, I would quite like to work 1 day a week. I would actually quite like that. I could get myself together. Perhaps I'd do a Saturday job in Jaeger, or I'd even go all the way to Harrods for my Saturday job. I had a friend at college who had a Saturday job at Harrods, and then he went on to be a butler in America. How fantastic. Utterly fantastic. Anyway, digressing as usual. Something to look forward to once a week where you are going out. And I think shop assistants not necessarily being, in control of the till, because we can't add up anymore, can we? We don't know how to use calculators. We'll be scrawling on the back of our hand, long division, like the old days, yeah? An assistant in a shop, sort of wandering around the aisles with your badge on, going up to people and saying, can I help you? Wouldn't that be marvellous? I'd bloody love that. I would love that job, and I would love that if I was a customer. Because whenever I go in a shop, they could target the elderly. They could look for anyone over 50. That could be their job description. Help other old people and young people if they look like they're having a drama. So when I go into, for example, I go into DIY shops quite a lot, and I can never find the right paint. I want a certain colour. And if a nice elderly man came up to me and said, can I help you? You look a bit lost. I'd be absolutely over the bloody moon. I really would. That would make my day. And we'd have a big discussion about how I was going to, decorate my living room. And, maybe that's, as a customer, I would like that sense of chatting and talking and getting to know somebody, building a relationship, because you build relationships with people, even if you're only in their company for 2 minutes. There's so much going on in your brain about the relationship that you're having with this person. Is this person nice? Do I like this person? Can I trust this person? Is this person somebody I have things in common with? Do you see what I mean? Your relationship, even before you've said your first word, you're having some sort of human. I'm not talking about a lover's relationship here. I'm talking about a human relationship, sort of relational, in time and space, a presence and an emotional linking. That's what I'm talking about here. And wouldn't it be lovely if every big store had one of these elderly people roaming around? They'd need to have their faculties about them, because unfortunately, if you've gone too far to the other side, you'd be detrimental to the business. So, unfortunately, you've got to be fit and healthy. Of course, you've got to be fit and healthy. What about a Saturday job doing something online, but not something really boring like listing on social media? I don't think we'd be very good at that. But what about you could man the chat room on social media, couldn't you? The complaints department, or and just be really, really uber nice. I'm just terribly sorry, because you'd have that sort of post-war manner structure where you'd be terribly polite and not wishing to offend. You'd have to be told, wouldn't you, that you mustn't come out with anything racist. So you can't say, don't mention the war sort of thing. Do you know what I mean? You would have, that would be part of your job description, would be that you mustn't be biased about Russians or Germans. My mum would say all sorts of really, really incorrect things, because I do think as we get older we become less politically correct, because do you know what? We don't understand the bloody landscape. We don't understand what's going on anymore. I'm always saying things and my daughter's like, you can't say that, Mum. And I'm like, why not, if it's what I think? No, you can't say that. It's you'll get into trouble, or this or this or this, or, people will be offended. You'll ruin someone's life with one comment. Like, really? Really? What the F, But anyway, I think if customers on the chat knew that, you're talking to, and they had a little badge, and you're talking to Bert, right, or Sarnia is my name. But it's not a very typical name of my generation. What would be a typical name? I don't know. Well, I don't know. Mabel? Is that a bit older than me? Sort of my mum's generation. My mum's name, Christine. Christine, what about that? Yeah, and a picture of a little old lady. Not a photograph of the person, but an avatar. One of the ones with grey hair. a little old man or a little old lady, then the person on the chat would know that they are talking to an elderly person, and they already have to filter out a lot of what they say as inappropriate because it's just from the time they were born and the time that they lived through. But if we were all a bit more forgiving about that, it would. It works on both sides, doesn't it? It works on the elderly person's side, and it works on the young person's side. And the interesting thing about social media and all these other ways that we communicate now, despite it being so accessible, and you can talk to people all over the world, and you can have conversations with people you would never normally have met, it's actually harder to communicate now because now everything's so bloody offensive and everything's so polarised and everything's so judged, and it's judged on the written word. And it never used to be. In the olden days, before the internet, you would meet somebody through verbal cues, body language, and proximity. So you'd be close to them, you'd make movements and facial expressions, and you'd say words. And that way, you would be judged on the whole package. Now, nobody's seeing your facial movements, nobody's seeing your body stance, and nobody's hearing the intonation in your words. All they're looking at are the words in print. And it's just so risky, isn't it? It's so risky because I do use a lot of facial expressions. So, and even as I'm talking to you now, I'm gesticulating all over the place. You can't see me doing that. You can just hear my voice. But I think you can hear inflections in my voice, can't you? You can pretty much understand when I'm joking, I hope. But maybe not always, actually. But if I giggle afterwards, I've said a joke. It's why we have lol, isn't it, after something on the internet. But lol isn't very subtle, is it? Lol is just lol. It's not, was that a sarcastic giggle? Was that a satirical snigger? Do you see what I mean? All these little nuances are not there. So this idea that we communicate so much more now is a complete myth, I think. Complete myth. Anyway, that's my topic of the day. What Saturday job would you have if you could have one now in your older years? My mum used to work in a fashion shop, and I know she'd love to work in a fashion shop now, but she'd have to do the afternoons because she doesn't like to get... It takes her now all morning before she can function and put her makeup on. So it would have to be from 2 till... Well, she likes to get home for tea as well. It would have to be from 2 p.m. till 4 p.m. Okay, so not a Saturday job, a little Saturday afternoon sojourn in the... Sojourn, is it sojourn or sojourn? No, sojourn, I think. In the coolest fashion shop in town. A couple of hours, get paid, and it would have to be quite well paid, otherwise she wouldn't see the point of it. Because she'd think she deserved more. She'd say, well, that's not enough for my bingo. My mum doesn't do bingo, but you know what I mean. So what would have to be sort of £20 an hour, wouldn't it? It'd have to be more than minimum wage. You can get away with paying minimum wage to 16-year-olds, but I don't think you can with the elderly. I think they value, they've lived a life and they know that their skills are important and valued. So I think £20 an hour, 2 hours a week, and we've sorted out loneliness for a lot of people. Yep, that's such a good idea.